Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. And in this video I'm going to review The Fall of Hobo Johnson by Hobo Johnson. Hobo Johnson is quite a unique and interesting artist over the last couple of years, with his really weird of ridiculous delivery of having this sort of weird rapping that it mostly feels like a spoken word thing, but it mostly goes offbeat. He definitely has a really weird, obscure and avant-garde approach of rapping. His whole delivery in general is not something that you hear every day. And Hobo Johnson, with his weird and ridiculous approach on both his vocals and his music, has managed to make him blow up and have a big and respectable audience. Hobo Johnson, on the other hand, is an artist that people love to hate. And in my opinion, I can truly appreciate and really respect what he does. In my opinion, Hobo Johnson has lots of elements that could really work out in portraying a sound of experimental hip hop and experimental music that we don't really see all that much, at least in this vein. However, when Hobo Johnson released The Rise of Hobo Johnson, I didn't like this album at all. At all. In my opinion, the first album from Hobo Johnson was god awful. I really couldn't find anything that I would like out of this album, something that would remotely make me enjoy something out of it. Like I said, I truly love and appreciate what Hobo Johnson offers and what he delivers, but in my opinion, the execution on this thing leaves a lot to be desired. Extremely weak and forgettable instrumentals. They try to offer some nice moments here and there, but anything with sort of redeeming quality instantly fades out, and Hobo Johnson's ridiculous delivery was just all over the place on this thing, and I didn't like it at all. I wouldn't like the way he would rap or just talk over these bland instrumentals. In most of the cases, it would come out really annoying. And even the lyrics over here, most of the time, they were really cringy. Despite me though not liking this album at all, Hobo Johnson was one of the very few artists which would have an album with that negative reputation, at least for me, but I would see the potential for him developing himself and actually releasing something better, something that would fit more into this whole approach that Hobo Johnson takes with his music and actually manage to present something unique but actually sounding good rather than just feeling like another severely flawed execution. And then Hobo Johnson releases Typical Story, and wow, this is anything that I wanted from a Hobo Johnson song. Not only does this song shows the true potential what I was anticipating from a Hobo Johnson song, I just really love this one. I think Typical Story is an amazing song. First of all, I love the instrumental on this thing. Really catchy, really varied, really simple in its structure, but it's quite effective, and the guitar work on this track is quite impressive. And I like how this track goes into this more rock-oriented sound, being quite catchy, but also having some more electrified elements with the beat, and also having a really simple and small trap segment that works quite well. Also, this weird and ridiculous delivery from Hobo Johnson works perfectly with this exaggerated amount of distortion. Incredible and one-of-a-kind touch that really works, especially on this song in particular. And also, I think the lyrics on this track are really good. The lyrics are fantastic. Yeah, they mostly sound like something sort of like I'm 14 and this is deep, or like we live in a society type of stuff. But honestly, I end up liking the message, and the whole delivery, the way he portrays it, is quite nice. It's mostly about those struggles in life, or those struggles you might create by yourself that might end up leading into some wrong life-changing decisions, and all of those decisions are just portrayed as typical stories. With that being said, Typical Story is a quite pleasant surprise, and it's miles ahead better than anything Hobo Johnson has done before. After this point, Hobo Johnson releases other two singles, which they don't manage to get into the level of Typical Story, but still, those two tracks were also quite decent. Ugly Kid in comparison is way more smooth. I like the jazzy instrumentation to it, and I think that Elohim's vocals fit quite well. They're really chill, they're really calm, and I like her delivery. The thing I didn't really like about this song all that much was the slight auto-tune on Hobo Johnson's vocals, but still, even though I'm not that much of a fan of the delivery of Hobo Johnson in this track in particular, this was still a decent song. And then there was the track Subaru Crosstrek, which I like the instrumental to it a lot. I like this whole trap vibe to it. I think the percussion work is quite interesting. It's really unique and it has the elements of a Hobo Johnson song. I don't really like the lyrics on this one. I think they're kinda weak, but still, we're talking about two quite decent tracks, and with that being said, I actually was anticipating this new album from Hobo Johnson. Yes, Hobo Johnson, being an artist who released an album that I didn't care for at all, actually releases an album that I was quite anticipating. So the two titles actually feel like a sort of irony, because with the second one is where I feel the actual rise of Hobo Johnson. And the album is out. And there's not actually a moment that manages to surpass Typical Story, which is the first track, and it's a really nice way to start the album and it quite fits. But it doesn't necessarily need to. Typical Story is a quite energetic and catchy song, while the rest of the album mostly goes into a more mellow and slower direction, which is not necessarily a bad thing. There are also some other moments where they might start really slow and really chill, but actually have some choruses that would be quite epic and quite grandiose, having a lot of them, having a lot of energy and a lot of passion, which is something that is the case with the track You and the Cockroach, which, even though I think the instrumental on this is quite nice and I like the sudden transition to this really epic and really dynamic chorus, the track on itself is not that great. It's actually possibly my least favorite moment, mostly because the lyrics on this thing were really weak. I didn't care for the lyrical content at all, and the delivery from Hobo Johnson is quite annoying, and also this whole vocals in the background just screaming some words that are repeated before. The whole delivery, the whole way he presented the song is one of the elements that I don't really like from the sound of Hobo Johnson, but still the track itself has some decent elements of instrumentation. It doesn't come out as cringy as most of the stuff that he released on The Rise of Hobo Johnson, but this was still a bit of an annoying track. Another moment where it has this sudden transition from something really smooth to something really dynamic and really heavy to the chorus is the track Sorry My Dear, which I don't know how to feel about the vocals on this thing. Like, what the fuck is with the vocals on this track? They're really weird and they're not something that we've seen Hobo Johnson go into this direction with his vocals before. I really like his delivery on this thing, like especially with the chorus where he screams his lungs off and his delivery is quite passionate and quite aggressive. But what's with the vocals on this thing? This whole manipulation and these heavy effects sort of ruined the song for me, and it's quite sad because in my opinion, when it comes to the instrumental, it's actually one of the most compelling moments out of the album. But despite that, it's still a quite decent song, but in my opinion it could be better if it wasn't for those vocals. I didn't know why they would think it was a good idea for going with something that robotic and so just weird and obscure. The other track which I didn't really care for was the track Happiness. In my opinion, it's a really smooth and melancholic track. The track itself is the opposite of Happiness. Instead, I would say that it's possibly the saddest song out of this entire album. But I didn't really care for the delivery from Hobo Johnson over this thing, and the instrumental was just really minimalistic and bland, but it's still a quite okay song, just I didn't really care for all that much. Though what was easily one of the most pleasantly surprising moments in the album was the track February 15th. In my opinion, I quite like the approach on this song. This is a really short live song which is a folk tune. It's just Hobo Johnson with his guitar, and I actually quite like anything that has to do with this song. I like the simple approach on the guitar melody, and Hobo Johnson, Big Hobo Johnson, works perfectly in this cut. I like his delivery on this thing. I love this whole spoken word vibe that he presents in this avant-garde fashion, and I also love the sudden transition of him sitting quite smooth and nice and then just screaming his lungs off. And I also like the lyrics on this track. I think they're quite interesting and quite nice. For a live track, this is really well done, and the delivery from Hobo Johnson is quite passionate and easily one of the best tracks he has done. The rest of the album just comes out as fairly decent, not something quite that astonishing, and tracks like Mover Aware and Moonlight have an okay delivery from Hobo Johnson I didn't quite care of, but still the instrumentals were quite decent and they had some nice elements to them, just not keeping the same formula, just having some nice and smooth transitions here and there. Then there's the track All in My Head, which is one of the catchier moments of the album. I love the All in My Head vocals in the background. There's also the track Ode to Justin Bieber, which is another just okay song that I didn't really care for, though it has one of the better choruses out of the album. Quite a nice use of this weird trap instrumental with the avant-garde approach of Hobo Johnson. And then there's the final track, I Want a Dog. It's an okay track to end the album. So there it is, The Fall of Hobo Johnson. Yeah, the album for itself is not something quite astonishing, but this album is miles better than what he did on The Rise of Hobo Johnson, and this is the album where I truly see the potential of Hobo Johnson, of him actually delivering some quite nice songs. Still there are some weak tracks, but for the most part this album is fairly decent. Way better delivery from Hobo Johnson, way better instrumentals, and now I'm into this point where I'm actually anticipating a new album from Hobo Johnson, and I'm really curious what he's going to do after this point, because what he presented with The Fall of Hobo Johnson might not be something really that revolutionary or something that amazing, but it's still a fairly decent album that has some nice moments here and there, a vast improvement of its predecessor, and a really pleasant experience. I'm going to give this album a 6+ out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.